Richard Masson is an executive fellow at the University of Calgary School of Public Policy. He worked with the Alberta government for 17 years and another 14 years in the oil and gas sector. He joins us now from Calgary. Hi, Mr. Masson. Great to see you again.
Great to be here, Vashi.
Thanks for your time. Alberta saw a loss, we saw with the new jobs report today, of 17,000 jobs in December because losses of full-time jobs basically outpaced gains in part-time ones. I know there were some overall gains back in November. How much of those numbers do you think were impacted by the size of the differential prior to the production cuts?
Well, we've seen direct impacts of the low prices that we were getting for our oil and gas in November, December timeframe. So, for example, number of drilling rigs active at the end of December dropped to 70 rigs from more than 150 earlier in the month or the prior year, so down more than 50% from what it had been. So, there's been a lot of direct impacts that come from the lower prices, and they're working their way through their economy now.
How much will those be mitigated by the production cuts that officially, the government mandated ones that officially came into effect on January 2nd?
Well, we'll see how this works out. So there's 325,000 barrels a day of cuts that have come into effect. And as a result, the differential is back in the range of $12, $15, maybe $20 a barrel. It's been bouncing around a bit, as opposed to the $40 or $50 a barrel. So cash flow to companies is better than it had been. But of course, they are lacking the production. So, those production cuts are about $13 million per day of lost revenue from the lack of production. And that adds up to, $400 million a month lost production to the industry. So you gain on price, but you lose. Some of the ones who've cut have lost on volume. So overall, the cash flow for companies is better than it was, but the negative sentiment that came from the wide differentials and then from the government having to step in still, pervades the industry, and we'll have to see if people are willing to drill new wells and get activity going again.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. With the cuts to drilling, what do you anticipate for those companies that did make those decisions? What does 2019 essentially have in store for them?
So producers are a bit lucky in the sense that they can live off the past drilling that they have done. So if you take, Canadian Natural is one of the biggest companies in Canada, 1 million barrels a day of production. They are spending $3.6 billion in 2019, which is down about $1 billion. So it's about a 20% drop in their capital budget. A lot of their capital budget goes to maintenance for their big oil sands projects and for long-term growth projects that are halfway built or nearly complete that they need to finish. But where they have discretion, they are able to cut. So they're dropping their total drilling to less than 100 wells for 2019, which is down 75% from the previous year. So for those companies who are in that sector, the drillers, the service companies who are involved in supplying the rigs, the folks, with the hotels and the catering and all those things, they feel that impact very immediately. So there's different impacts that affect different parts of the economy depending on how a big producer chooses to allocate its capital.
When you're looking at the outlook for the differential more generally in 2019, we've got talk about obviously the production cuts. We've also got the plan to increase rail capacity, at least on the province's part. How much of that will impact, do you think, the differential? Like, how long do you expect it to stay within this sort of quote-unquote normal range versus what we saw late last year?
So what we've got to hope is that, with these production cuts, we start to reduce the 35 million barrels that are in inventory. We need to reduce that by probably at least a third to get it to a more normal level. Rail is ramping up. That's going to be helpful. It'll ramp up more over the course of the next few months. So it was about 270,000 barrels a day in October. I hear expectations of 450,000 barrels a day by the summer, so that will be helpful. And then hopefully we get Line 3 starting up late in the year, which will bring on another 375,000 barrels a day of capacity late in 2019. So if those things come to pass, it's possible that we could end up with a differential kind of in the range of $20 US, which the industry can be much more comfortable with. As long as WTI prices hold up in that $45, $50 range, there'll be enough cash flow for things to remain stable. The challenge is it doesn't really provide a lot of growth, and that new investment is what generates a lot of the construction jobs.
What would provide that kind of growth? Is a pipeline, for example, necessary for that to even become possible?
Yeah, I mean, we have some projects that are still in the process of being completed, and they're going to ramp up, later in 2019. Imperial just approved a big project called Aspen, which will come on later in the 2020s. So there are a few things happening, but to really see investment move forward, we need to see Trans Mountain expansion approved on a timely basis during this coming year. And just to put that in perspective, so oil sands investment in 2014 was $34 billion in a single year, and in 2018 it's down to about $13 billion. So a huge drop in investment that really impacts jobs not only in Alberta but across the country, because that's people and suppliers from all over were coming in for those activity.
Given the opposition to pipelines more generally, but then the type of opposition we saw to TMX, is there an argument to be made that some of these companies could have foreseen that there would be such a struggle to get this pipeline built and have focused, for example, more of their energy on building that or using increased rail capacity or just using rail more?
Yeah, I think some companies did take a very proactive stance. So if you take Imperial, for example, they started up their Curl Mine, which is a very, very large project, and they essentially, I'm paraphrasing my own mind, they essentially said there's no way we're going to have to shut in Curl production. We're going to help support a rail terminal being developed in Edmonton, and they did that. And so they backstopped a terminal that has 150,000 plus barrels a day moving out of it, and it could grow to 250,000 barrels a day in the coming months. So they took a very proactive stance because they had a lot of oil production coming on and they didn't want to see it stuck. Part of the challenge, though, for other companies is they think, well, if a pipeline is going to come on stream 2 years from now, it doesn't make a lot of sense to invest in rail capacity that's not going to be used 2 years from now. So, as long as the pipelines aren't full, investing in new rail capacity doesn't look like an easy economic choice to make. And if you think pipelines are coming soon, it doesn't pay out. And so for each individual company looking at it, they kind of said, hopefully some other person will invest in the rail capacity. I won't have to do it because, I could lose money on it. And when everybody kind of took that collective position, when the pipelines got pushed out, we didn't have enough capacity to move.
Just quickly before I let you go, because I'm running out of time, what do you think is going to happen in 2019 with TMX? Do you expect construction on it to start?
Well, I hope by the end of the year we've got all the approvals in place that construction can start. So, we got to do that consultation piece correctly once the revised NEB report is in place. Assuming that happens, we get a cabinet approval, construction can start again. There really is a narrow scope to what needs to be done. So as long as it's done properly, I can see approval happening.
Do you think it could actually take the whole year, though?
I don't think you can rush the consultation. So this is going to be a fine balance that needs to be struck by the people who are tasked with doing it to make sure they do it so it's not subject to another legal challenge. I don't know what the timing is, but these things tend not to get rushed.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Masson. Appreciate your time.
Always great to talk to you, Vashi.
You too.